So hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar, and this is on how trivago makes their products go faster. My name is Robert Kessley and I will be your moderator today. I am a senior performance engineer here at Catchpoint for EMEA, and I will be basically taking you through how the webinar will be working today. We have a few housekeeping notes before we kick off. All attendee lines are muted and the presentation is being recorded and will be sent out over the next couple of business days. Please feel free to use the Q&A feature within the Zoom meeting, and time permitting, we will be able to answer a few. When I say we, it will be mainly Sean. So, talking of Sean, let's introduce Sean from trivago. I am absolutely delighted that he's given up his time today to be able to share this fascinating story of their journey of performance improvements and monitoring at trivago. Sean leads a performance team that are tasked in making trivago's products faster. Previously, he worked at Vodafone in several projects such as real-time metrics, automation, and performance for mobile products. And in his spare time, he's helping to transform how hiring is done today at zillpath.com. In today's webinar, Sean will share some insight into the depth of visibility that they now have across their 55 global sites and what they're actually learning from the performance analytics gathered. A little fun fact about Sean is that he's lived in 7 countries, from Saudi Arabia to Bolivia, and he's now currently abiding in Germany. So it is my greatest pleasure to hand you over to Sean, who will now start his presentation. Over to you, Sean. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Joan, as Robert mentioned, and I work in trivago since 3 years. I wish to have your British accent, Robert. No, I'm a big admirer of your presentations.
Thank you.
But, you had to live with my strong Spanish accent. But I hope the information is interesting enough to make you forget about that. Okay, let me introduce the presentation. I want to give an overview of performance at trivago. This is the current footprint of trivago platforms. We're covering, we have like 55 live platforms, and we have 5 data centers. Trivago is a German company. We only have offices in Germany. We have 2 small offices in Amsterdam and Spain. And as you can see, growing a global business from one location puts some challenges ahead. Our main data centers are Düsseldorf, as I mentioned. Then we have in US, San Francisco, and we just opened a new one in Washington. And then in Asia, we have Hong Kong, and in mainland China, we have in Guangzhou. And that's an interesting chapter of this presentation, how we make trivago performant in China. Yeah, also as you can see, the different countries are delivered from different data centers. We just moved all our South American platforms to Washington because of latency, and we are delivering, for instance, Australia from San Francisco data center and not from Hong Kong because of latency as well. Latency is a constant enemy of performance, and there's not much you can do about it other than getting closer. A bit of fact sheet of how big are we and how much data we are processing every day. This data is from before the IPO. We went in the NASDAQ last fall, so this is 1 year old more or less, and it's 120 million monthly active users, which is, we compare with Twitter, which present results today and is now growing in user base. I think it's like a 1/3 of Twitter. We are growing like 50% every year, so that number now is higher than what you see there. Most of our traffic is images. Hotels, no one likes to book hotels without looking at how it is, so we have a lot of images related traffic. Okay, when I started in trivago 3 years ago, we wanted to improve all the monitoring, and the concept that we had was very common sense approach. So I will describe the stack that we have for monitoring here. So basically for end user experience, synthetic monitoring, we're using a Catchpoint. Real user monitoring, we're using an in-house solution similar to open source Boomerang. For analytics reporting, all the metrics that we are collecting from servers, we use open source products. We're using a collect.de, which is an agent that sends metrics from all the servers that we have on those data centers. We store the data in a time series database. We're currently using InfluxDB for that. We visualize using Grafana. We also have Prometheus for monitoring or container solutions. Then for backend application profiling, we move from XHProf to Blackfire. Trivago uses a Symfony framework for their PHP part, and Blackfire is a product from the same provider. For front-end application profiling, we're using a web page test family of products and all the Chrome browser tools. For log data, we use Elasticsearch cluster. We stream a lot of logs from, well, all the possible logs from Kafka to Elasticsearch. We're indexing around 1 terabyte of logs every day. And that's basically the monitoring stack that we have at the moment. What synthetic, the role that plays synthetic monitoring for us here is important for several reasons. First is like it helps us to calibrate other monitoring systems, because it's a third party that doesn't have to do anything with our infrastructure. So it's from an external point of view, it gives us a neutral view on what we are measuring. And also it's like a temperature measurement. So if something goes wrong there, and there is a basic metrics that we're measuring there, if something goes wrong there, we will immediately have to deep dive in all the other metrics. Because one of the problems that we have with measuring is that you are overloaded with a lot of information. So having these basic measurements from all around the world, from a neutral platform that we know is working and has nothing to do with our infrastructure, will give us a reliable information if something is going wrong on our side, or third parties, or our CDNs, or whatever component that we have for delivering our content. So it's like the starting point for our measurements. I'm going to describe now some of the improvements that we did last year and how we use our monitoring for that. This is that we did last summer, or before even last summer. First, backend performance. Here you have our typical profile of backend response times. Ideally, in an ideal world, that should go from higher response times slowly down, but in the real world, it slowly gets worse. We deploy every week several times, and we constantly adding new features, and those small degradations are very difficult to track. It's always a fight between the performance budget and the new feature that needs to go live. And the big one, degradation or increase in response time that you see in the middle, those are easy to spot and addressable. Usually they are related to new feature and it's been tested and not that well implemented, or with some performance impact. But those are easy to spot and easy to fix. But the real life performance is a small degradation. And then the good thing are those quick wins that allows you to bring down again the response times to what is a fast response time. So the ones that we did last summer was a PHP 7 upgrade. That was really, it made a big difference. We were one of the first to migrate to PHP 7. And it improved a lot response times. I'm going to cover that one. here. So if you haven't upgraded to PHP 7, do it, because it's definitely worthy. Response times went down almost half. Memory consumption as well, and CPU consumption as well. So there was no issues with the migration. It was done in one month by a team of 3 people, and the performance impact was really positive. Second interesting thing that we figured out last year is has to do with CPU frequency of our servers. So as trivago was growing in traffic, we were adding servers. And during some time, we could notice that some servers were faster than others, but we couldn't figure out why. And we thought maybe our monitoring is not that reliable as we thought. So there's one feature in Catchpoint that is inside. So we were exposing to the outside the response time per server, which is the trace point filter on the left. So we could confirm that actually our monitoring was right. So this was information that we were getting also from an external platform, from Catchpoint in this case, and was telling us that some servers were actually 2 times faster than the others. And you see the numbers of the servers, the higher the number, the slower. And those were the new servers that we bought with more cores and more memory, more expensive. But then we realized the old ones, those were faster, and they were faster because they had a higher CPU clock speed. So what we did was during last summer, and because we had upgraded to PHP 7 before, we shut down half of the data center that we have in Düsseldorf, and we just replaced the new service by old service that we bought on sale. So we save a lot of money by buying those cheaper servers, and we made the site 2 times faster because those old servers were faster. You can see in this graph is interesting. It's comparing or clickouts week over week, and we were doing that week. We were doing less clickouts than the week before, and in the middle of the week we switched those servers, and that blue line start being higher than the previous one. So there are several case studies in wpustats.com where you can see the impact of performance in business if you need to convince management of how relevant is performance for the business. Yeah, there were some other as well improvements on the front end. On the front end side, those are the main ones. We basically introduced Webpack, and that was a big change. So we'll describe a bit all of this. But the introduction of Webpack, we had before like 2 big JavaScript files, and that had several problems because, as I mentioned, we were releasing several times, and all the logic or a lot of logic from trivago is on that JavaScript, and different teams had to manipulate that same file, and some of that was very sensitive. So it could cause trouble. So one team doing changes in that file, and another team wanted to do the same changes. So we started splitting that in several files, and besides of helping teams to work independently, and in different parts of the logic, it also helped on from the user point of view for the things I'm going to mention now. So some of the logic in those JavaScripts doesn't change that much. Clickouts or something that is not usually changed, it won't be released, and it will have to keep the same naming. New features or new tests or parts of the code that change more often, those will be released and they will change. So users won't have to request the files that are not changing like before. Every time we were releasing, the whole JavaScript had to be requested by users. So we cache in more efficiently part of the trivago logic. The other advantage is that we only load the part of the JavaScript that is relevant for whatever page so the user is interacting with, and that reduces also the amount of data transfer.
So Sean, that's a very good point, because I see on a day-to-day basis that people tend to load all their JavaScript up, you know, on the first hit. Do you have any more advice, sort of like or best practice around what you've done by just loading the JavaScript that's required, instead of, like, for example, loading up 400 kilobytes of JavaScript that isn't going to be used necessarily for the page that a user is on?
Well, probably more detailed information that is on the bottom is that tech blog that we wrote, the front-end guys wrote about best practices on how to make JavaScript start up faster. And probably there's some better, more detailed advice from what I can describe here. It comes also with some no so good, some negative impacts which I will cover in the next page. But what I will say, new problems that has to be addressed in a different way, and I will cover that in the next page. But definitely it's worth it to move on that direction.
No, brilliant. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Then those two. So introduction of Webpack and splitting all the JavaScript logic help on that sense. And also we move we collect a lot of information for business intelligence, for how it works, all the dynamics of our website, and also we have third party trackers and on our page, but we move all that to the very end. So we prioritize the user interaction. We want the user to be able to interact the first, and then anything else comes after. That's the most important part. And then the fourth part is we inline all our icons in SVG inside the HTML, and I will cover that in the next slides. So prioritizing users versus collecting data, that I think is no brain, and especially this is part of the metrics that real user monitoring metrics that we have, especially relevant for when latency is involved. Countries like Brazil or Germany, on the Brazil on the left, Germany on the right, because of latency, there are huge difference on when the user can interact. So when the JavaScript is ready, on when Google Tag Manager start, and you can see everything is ready before, and then we trigger only when the user can interact. We trigger the Google Tag Manager which is what we use for our third-party trackers. One thing I mentioned before introducing Webpack has a lot of advantages, but one disadvantage is the number of files it increases. So as I mentioned before, number of JavaScript files like 1 year before, like 2 years ago, was 3. You see that red line on the left side, and it started growing as we were splitting the logic into several files. And it grows until now 17, 20, I don't even know anymore how many. And those are round trips that you have to do to get that data. So the number of requests keeps growing. But on the other hand, and you see on the right, that what is important is that the visual progress, we made it to be lower. So the user can interact faster with the page. They can see something faster with the page. And that is the relevant part of having split all the logic in different files. Inlining SVG icons was part of another refactoring of all the front end and trivago. We had a huge sprite with all the icons, and was unmaintainable. No one wanted to touch or maintain that part, and we decided to inline all the icons into SVG. Advantages. Well, we are only loading the icons that are relevant for the page that we are showing, and also it's easier for developers to maintain that, so they know which icon goes in which page. Before there were so many, and historically no one wanted to remove because they were not sure which one was used where. They were in a huge file that was loaded all the time, no matter if they were used on that page or not. So in this comparison that you have here from the synthetic monitoring, you can see the render start how it went down. HTML went up, but because of compression, that doesn't, the amount of HTML, but because of compression, doesn't have really an impact on performance.
So Sean, we've had a question come in. How are you measuring the visual progress from the previous slide?
That was from a web page test, that graph we got. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, the next thing that we did, this actually was this year, and it's not so related to performance, but it has an impact in performance, and I wanted to include it here as well. We wanted to move to progressive web apps. Actually, we have already progressive web app. So we have to move to HTTPS. Probably we were one of the last to move to HTTPS. We have to say we didn't care much, which was wrong, and but we managed to catch up, and in 3 months we migrated the whole trivago platform to HTTPS. So one of the things we did that we didn't have done before and should have done earlier was to enable Keep Alive. We introduced new SSL terminators, and then we decided to enable Keep Alive. So when you see on this response times comparison by all the hosts that we have on our homepage, on one of the homepage of trivago, the biggest improvement was enabling Keep Alive for the trivago domain. So there were no more round trips needed for the trivago domain. One single connection, and then we deliver all the content. When it comes to migrating HTTPS, we had to be careful with third parties. You have to migrate alone. It's not only migrating your website, it's migrating all the partners or all the trackers or any domain that is on your website has to move together with you to HTTPS. And they may have not the right performance, right platform for HTTPS, or not so fast as HTTP, or maybe in a different location, or who knows what. So it's something that is important to measure before migrating. How it's going to be the performance of in HTTPS of the different domains that you have on your page. Yeah, the biggest impact that we have on when we migrated to HTTPS, the impact in performance. In this graph, we split with synthetic monitoring. We divide all the different type of requests, if they are trivago requests, if they are CDN requests, or if they are third-party requests. So something that trivago is something that we can address. CDN is something that the CDN that we use we can address, and we should address to them. And third parties is something that we cannot control as close as we control all the other things, but we need to keep always an eye on third parties. As you can see, the biggest impact was coming from third parties, but as they are asynchronous loaded, and we load them at the end, it didn't really have any impact on the user, for the user. So CDN wise and trivago wise, we were slightly slower in some countries, almost not noticeable. You see in UK and Germany. For long latency, for high latency countries like Australia, actually was an improvement, because as I mentioned before, we enabled Keep Alive, which we didn't have. And that made round trips, it decreased the number of round trips needed to get all the content from trivago. And that was beneficial at the end. So
Are you using a tag management system for your third parties?
Yeah, we're using a Google Tag Manager. We had before in-house one, but we have migrated to Google Tag Manager 1 year ago, more or less.
And you say you're now loading, and following best practice, you're loading your third parties, you know, after DOM content loaded, yeah?
Yeah.
Cool.
So, yeah, we also introduced HTTP2, not only for trivago, but we're using a HCAS CDN, and they introduced HTTP2 on end of the last quarter, and we benefit from that. As you can see there, we're loading we're loading all the images and JavaScript and CSS, and as I mentioned, as we introduced Webpack, we had a lot of files, and for long distance countries, loading all those assets it requires a lot of connection setups, and that's always adding to the time that it takes to load the page. With the introduction of HTTP2, it's a continuous stream, so there's only one connection. You can see at the bottom, instead of having multiple connections to retrieve all those files, it's only one connection needed. So there is only one road trip to set up that connection, and that improved performance. You see on the top of the image the improvement on the CDN load times. Okay. Yeah, this is a very interesting chapter, trivago in China. China is a totally different internet, and it puts challenges to any company trying to grow there. Main reason is the firewall, or the main technical reason is the firewall, and the fact that many things that work in here in Germany won't work in China. Facebook won't be, if you are adding some Facebook trackers, they probably won't work. They won't work there, and some other things won't work there. For instance, when we migrated to HTTPS, we migrated using Google Maps API for showing maps at trivago, and we moved that to HTTPS. But in China, Google Maps on HTTPS is not allowed. So we had to make an exception, and we didn't migrate that part in our Chinese platform. We have to stay on HTTPS. So growing in China, I always put some new technical challenges. So the approach that we had in China, serving the content from Hong Kong doesn't work. It's the same as you serve it probably from Düsseldorf. It doesn't make any difference because of the firewall. So we went for a hybrid solution. We tried to put the minimum in a data center in China, because it's always difficult to operate, to do operations from remotely in a data center in China. It's slow, it's very painful. So we tried to put there as minimum as possible. And that's our front end. And then part of our Java backend to collect prices from the Chinese OTAs. So basically, trivago collect prices from different hotel providers. Some of them are local hotel providers in China, probably for Chinese destinations, but still Chinese people also likes to travel abroad, and we have international OTAs, which are then we retrieve those prices from Hong Kong. And between those two data centers, we set up an MPLS line. So like a VPN connection that doesn't go through the firewall, and it's a direct connection between both data centers. And the traffic exchange between those two is is addressed through that MPLS line. We also have a different CDN in China. We are using a China cache. I think HCAS doesn't have a presence in China, and using local providers in China makes a big difference. So the difference when we added the MPLS line, you can see in this graph how in response times and stability improve a lot, but still our response times were really high in China. So it was not only introducing that connectivity between those data centers, that VPN that improves the situation. There are more things that need to be done in China. And one of them is a basic one that many people, don't care much, but is really important, and it's DNS performance. You can see in this image how the DNS performance in Germany was compared to China in terms of response times and stability. That's because we were using our name service in either in Germany or in the US, and of course latency and the firewall will make that those response times will skyrocket. And if DNS performance is bad, everything else will be bad. So it's the first step, requesting all the content. Even it can fail, and if it fails to load some of the relevant JavaScript for trivago, the website won't work, and that is really bad. So we moved to a local provider. You can see in this image as well how we how the response times improve, and also the availability on the left side. Immediately the response times for the DNS went down, and so went down the response times for the website, that now is still high, but acceptable, I will say, for the moment.
So Sean, is there any mileage in also adopting a .cn domain name for China?
I don't know, to be honest. I don't know what to say there. Our domain is .com in China.
Mm-hmm.
I think both work. I don't have, to be honest, I don't have any insight if it will be an advantage or disadvantage to have a CN domain for China.
It's just that we've seen, from time to time that when you have a .com domain and you need to resolve it from within China, it has to hit root servers outside of China, whereas a .cn domain will hit root servers within China.
Yeah, for that point of view, it will be an advantage because the root, we see the response times even using a local DNS provider. Whenever you have to go to the root service, we see the response times going up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely, probably yes. You're right. It will be from that point of view, it will be definitely an advantage. Yes.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, then the third part is the recommendation when working in China is to keep an eye on the third parties, because marketeers, they tend to think that the internet is the same everywhere, but things or campaigns that may work on Europe or on US won't work in China. As I mentioned before, we had those issues with Google or Facebook. So you need to check always if your third parties how is the infrastructure they have, or how they perform from China, and measure that before starting a campaign in China with them. Okay, I will cover a bit now how we have used synthetic monitoring, some cases, how we use synthetic monitoring for some of the features that we use in the last months. Well, one obvious thing is, as I mentioned, we selected a Chinese provider for CDN, and we just compared the performance using synthetic monitoring, availability and performance, and we compare both side by side during the period of time from all the locations within China. So we measure it from China, and then we decided to go. In this case, it was at the time we did the evaluation, we got better numbers from China Cache, and we went for China Cache. That's one usage that we have. After going with China Cache, you have to do the setup and check that it works properly. One thing that we use again here is this insights feature that you see on the left, the same as we use for the service. So we expose with the probe, we expose information, and then you can graph based on that information. In this case, it was the headers from the CDN, from China Cache at the bottom. So we could measure we could see the hits and the misses and the spires. And if there is any issue, then we'll spot it here before going live. third one is also CDN issues. That's an interesting point of view because CDNs are in the middle. Sometimes you have issues and you're not sure if it's the CDN or if it's your platform or what it is. And having this observation from a third party, from a different platform, can help you to confirm that actually is an issue with the CDN, and you can then address that with them with some data. Otherwise, you are like a blind. You don't know what is going on, and this one is giving you some proof that there is some issues, and it's nothing that is coming from the inside of your organization. It's something that comes from a neutral organization, let's say, and it has some technical data that everyone can understand, and you can share with them, and then help them fix the issue or try to fix it faster. And as I mentioned, CDNs are very important for Trivago because of the JavaScript. Our website won't work without JavaScript, so if something fails, it will cause trouble. Like this issue that we had, that was an issue that was our responsibility, but we couldn't figure it out because it was hidden by the CDN. So basically, we had a misconfiguration of the assets that we deliver. You see on the top, we were requesting that request. We were tracing that request on the top for some JavaScript, and that was not loading for some locations in Spain, or intermittently only for a platform, only for Spain, which is strange because we roll out everything for all platforms at the same time. So why Spain is failing? And we figured out that the CDN had an issue, and they had to flash some of the content, and then they request again that content to origin. And because we had a misconfiguration on the time to life for those files, we were not delivering the right JavaScript, and that will cause the website to fail intermittently. So this one was a good example that it was driving us crazy, and we didn't know. We were blaming the CDN, they were blaming us, and then this one helped us to understand which file was failing and why was that happening. Another thing as well is third-party issues if they are not loading from remote locations. As I mentioned, we're running everything from Düsseldorf in Germany, but we have 55 markets, and sometimes there are issues. And in this case, we were not loading the third parties, and that will have an impact on all the measurements that we have for the campaigns that we're running, like retargeting or conversions or conversion rates, and how successful are the campaigns that we run on Facebook or any other platform, and that has a really impact on different departments. So that was also important. And then the last one, again, we have a lot of features that we do feature testing. They are live on the portal, on the website, and we measure in the performance of those features individually by getting exposing the feature ID and measuring the performance of that feature. Next one, Room 5. That's an interesting exercise as well. As I mentioned, most of our Trivago website runs on bare metal and different data centers, but we use also Amazon Cloud. There are different parts of Trivago data pipelines and some others that are running in Amazon Cloud. It's like a hybrid approach that we have. And one of the things that we moved to the cloud is the Trivago online hotel magazine. It's called Room 5. That's a WordPress blog. And here is an interesting graph, because we had those WordPress servers running in the data center. No one was really paying attention to them. It was like a blog that we had. But then we decided to put more effort on content marketing. So we migrate them to AWS, and that's the first drop that you see there. We got better machines, motivated team to move to a new technology. So everything was really looking bright, and then that was it for some time until you start hitting on the right side. You start seeing the issues, availability issues. Those drop on the green line. That's because yeah, the product is growing, and then you start having problems with the scalability, auto-scaling, how to manage auto-scaling in AWS, how you grow the traffic if it's a new technology for you and you start experimenting with that, then yeah, there are some issues and you have to address them. And those were some of the lessons learned from doing this exercise. Then on the end of the graph, you see that suddenly performance is degrading a lot. So we are back, or even worse than when we started, and that's in that case was because we added the Facebook SDK to plugin to WordPress, because we start using that on the Facebook campaigns, using or WordPress blog into Facebook campaigns, and that was bringing a lot of traffic, and that Facebook SDK plugin was doing a lot of calls for every request to Facebook, and it was slowing us down. So yeah, the result is these availability issues. You see the downtimes were increasing everywhere, response times were high, it was not that good, so we had to put some action and fix it. We removed the issue with the Facebook SDK, so basically we were requesting, for every request hitting the website, we were interacting with Google and the database. Then we optimized the database queries. We migrated to PHP 7. Again, for WordPress, it was not available as soon as for our main for the trivago website. But again, you see that migrating to PHP 7 is definitely a no-brainer, and it has a lot of benefits performance-wise. And then we did some other improvements in caching. So that's similar. It shouldn't be like this, as I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation. Ideally, it should be going down pattern, but actually, usually it's like it's going up, and then you fix some things, and it goes down again, and slowly start growing again. That's not the ideal ideal, but it's how at the end reality it is. So the results of that optimization was, yeah, response times were lower, and also the number of instances that we require to run that on Amazon Cloud decreases a lot, which makes cheaper to run. That when money comes in, it's also good to have an optimized website. And basically, that's it. At the end, is measure, analyze, and improve. That's what we do at trivago when it comes to performance. We keep constantly measuring and analyzing what can be improved, and then we try to improve that. And I think now, Robert, we are open for questions.
Yeah, no, excellent, Sean. I mean, our motto at Catchpoint is that performance is not a destination, it's a journey. And you've taken us on a fantastic journey there, and I'm sure you're going to continue to improve. Are you able to share any information about any projects that you have underway at the moment for continuous improvement?
Well, we're using you mean as what we're trying to achieve to prevent this degradation, continuously degradation, or how we want?
Or yeah, what's your next big jump performance-wise?
Well, what we tend to do now is to change the way. It's like what we've been doing now is action reaction. We tend to prevent that performance gets worse and worse over the time. Mm-hmm. So we tend to integrate on our continuous integration pipeline, and at early stage, performance checks, the performance budget. So, and we're doing that in all different levels on front end and back end. For back end, as I mentioned before at the beginning of the presentation, we're using a Blackfire, which is a profiling tool, and we're trying to make that part of every, even before every pull request that we do, to do that check and prevent that if it's much slower, or if it's slightly slower or higher than the budget that we have, we try to prevent that goes live. So mm-hmm. That's the idea that we have now, to do the shift, to try to not to get worse over the time, get better over the time slowly, rather than going with big improvements. or.
No, brilliant. So, I mean, the presentation focused on your, on your home pages, your web assets. Do you also monitor APIs that you use?
Yeah, also, yeah, a similar approach. I didn't cover on the presentation, but yeah, we do. It's a similar approach what we have as well. We have probes from around the world measuring performance of the API as well. Yeah, with synthetic monitoring.
Awesome. So I'm just waiting to see if any questions have come in from the audience. If you do have a question, please feel free to either drop it in the chat window or use the Q&A section of the Zoom meeting. So whilst I'll just wait to see if any questions come in, I just want to say a huge thank you to you, Sean, for sharing this performance journey and also your expertise and knowledge today. It has been truly insightful. You truly have demonstrated some of the key capabilities of the Catchpoint platform and also highlighted where you can easily make improvements to your website to further improve the user experience and obviously reduce your abandonment and retain your loyal customer base. As I've mentioned before, we will be sending a recording and a transcript out in the coming days after this, as well as any other related resources related to this particular webinar. So there are no further questions come in, Sean, so we can give everybody 12 minutes of their day back. Again, I want to say a huge thank you to you for your time today. And yeah, I wish you all the very best in your performance journey. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Robert. My pleasure.